Dear viewers of CCTV News, good afternoon. Starting by the 17th until the 23rd, every day in the afternoon, we will present to you one part of the story about our three-star mount, the Sanxingdui culture. And you could stay tuned to our program through multiple platforms. Today, we're about to give you the second session of our program. Together, we're about to decipher the mysteries of the ancient Shu. In the poems of a very famous poet Li Bai, we say that it's quite difficult in the ancient times to travel through the paths in the ancient Shu and in that remote province of Sichuan in China. So, since the old days, it's a land full of mysteries and also wonders. However, due to the lack of enough historical records, the culture of Sanxingdui, as well as that of the ancient Shu kingdoms, remained unknown to us. So what is the story behind that? Today, our sponsor is inviting all of you to join our trip to have a discovery about the three-star mount, the Sanxingdui culture. Today, we're about to bring you inside the Chengdu Museum, and together we're about to decipher the culture of the three-star mount, and later we can also step onto a trip of the archaeological discovery based on the animal and also the vegetarian ruins. Now to my colleague there. Dear viewers of CCTV News, my name is Lu Nian. I'm the journalist from CCTV. You are watching the second session of our program on the Sanxingdui culture. Today, we are visiting the Chengdu Museum. So we're about to discover another part of the colorful culture. In a second, we would do the deciphering together. You know, we have the Cancong Boguan, Duyu, Yufu, and Kaiming. We have five separate parts but intertwining parts of the ancient Shu Kingdom culture. And for the Sanxingdui culture, it's mainly coming from the first four dynasties. So today, together, we're about to discover a very interesting part of one of the several cultures. This is our guide today and also our researcher, Huang Xiaofeng. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Huang Xiaofeng. Today, you're about to be our guide to our journey. Yes, we will talk about Kaiming after passing by Cancong and Yufu, etc. Here, we have this part of exhibition to share with our visitors the city culture and also the last dynasties of the ancient Shu Kingdom. This is a very typical utensil made of bronze. It's also very high-level, high-ranked utensil used for sacrifices and ceremonies related. You can buy that part of Duyu dynasty. And starting by that dynasty, we have already cultivated very developed system of agriculture from Duyu to Kaiming dynasties. For the Shu area, for this land, we entered the last dynasty of the kingdom. So for the Kaiming dynasty, it's at the same period of the warriors, the state of the warriors. And now we are looking at the ancient Shu culture during the Kaiming dynasty. Compared to the previous four dynasties, we also have some special features with the very last dynasty of the ancient Shu Kingdom. For example, from the 5th to the 9th leader of this dynasty, it is said that starting by the 5th emperor of the dynasty, the kingdom has moved to Chengdu We can look at this. We have two other utensils with handles. And on the surface of that, we can notice two characters, which are the symbols for Chengdu. It's the first time that we can read the name of the city Chengdu from an artifact. What is so special about the Kaiming district? It has a lot of exchanges with the water businesses. According to the historical records, the reason why the Kaiming dynasty could defeat the previous dynasty and build its own power is because they have superpower in dealing with the water. They have the irrigation system as well as the water managing facilities. And this is a part collected from the archaeological discovery sites. It's one part of the ancient wooden tombs. And there's also a boat-shaped coffin, one of the oldest in China's history. And there's also a hole here. Could you please have a guess? What is the use for this hole? Yes, dear viewers, if you are interested and you would like to have a try with the gas, please don't hesitate to leave a message. And now we could give you the answer about this hole. It's left by the thieves. Actually, the thieves, they have already broken into this boat-shaped coffin in order to get the treasures inside. However, after that tomb robbery, we still have a lot of treasures left over. And just now, we have read that there is a immigration of the capital, and during the fifth leader of the dynasty, they have moved to the city of Chengdu and took it as its capital. So it's exactly in today's Chengdu city in the site, not vastly in the plateau of the Chengdu. For the fifth emperor of the Kaiming dynasty, they did immigrate into the city of Chengdu, and we can find a lot of proofs from the other artifacts. And we have also mentioned about the robbery happening inside the tombs. So what are the other remaining artifacts that could prove to us about this immigration of the city and also of the people? For example, this one, it has the lacquer coating. It's a bed with the coating of the lacquer. And it's also a symbol of the cultural exchanges between two different dynasties. So for this bed, we could also have a guess which side is the head of the bed and which side is the tail. And it's a quite easy guess. And to our left-hand side is the head of the bed. And together from this bed, we have also discovered some other things. For example, the straw mat. We can imagine how the ancestors were sitting on the bed. It has a very long length, up to 1.8 meters. And that length is not the most impressive thing. The highlight with this bed is actually that lacquer, the coating. Because lacquer is quite rare for that old days. And we can know that this is also a very luxury item. I used to have a visit in Egypt, and their beds for the ancient ancestors, they have different design. For example, they have higher tails than the position of the head. In Chinese culture, we would like to put the head side of the bed a little bit higher, because we have a proverb saying that we have very high pillows, so we have no worries. So this is kind of the philosophy and mentality of the Chinese people. It's quite different from the ancient Egyptians. And this is another object that could also perfectly represent the culture of the Chu area and also the ancient Shu Kingdom. From the whole styling and also its ornaments is quite similar to the old cultural system. We believe that it belongs to this area, and it must be a gift or an object of exchanges among the people of high rank in the society. And we can see also they have a very refined patterns of inscriptions on the surface. So for this utensil, it's also for the sacrificial ceremonies. When you have the sacrifice ceremonies, it can be used as a sacrificial object, and in the normal days, it can be used as a daily object. And people can also take it as a gift and give it to the friends. And what about the Chu culture bronze wares? This is an utensil called dui in Chinese language. Actually, this type of utensil is quite normal and it's usually seen in that part of time. But this shape, the holy round, the ball-like, where it's quite rare. And our viewers could also have a try to guess the use for this utensil. Just like our planet, it has two hemispheres. This is a bronzeware. At the same time, it's also an object for the sacrificial ceremonies. So in old days, we used to put the grains inside, like the millet or the rice or the wheat, all different kinds of the crops inside. And also with the cover, and it's also waterproof. Another example of the Chu objects discovered. This is the sword coming out of the ancient tombs. It's a very small knife, very small and cute sword. But that is not a typical sword from the Chu culture. Instead, these are the most representative swords, usually in the shape of the leaf of the willow tree. And you can also notice that we have two ornaments by one side of the sword, so you can put the rope through it and you can carry it with you. So this is in the shape of the willow tree leaf. And we also have other weapons. Those are very common weapons during the warriors' time, the states of the warriors. So we can have a closer look at it. For example, for this willow leaf-like swords on the surface of it, we can find different patterns. And does it have a special significance behind it? For the pattern of that, it's quite common in the Bashu area. So those must be the patterns left by our smiths. And sometimes we can also discover some other patterns that is the language of the Bashu. Yes, that is one part of the question that I would like to find answer to. Here in this area, in the Bashu area, sometimes we can find the Bashu language on the surface of the objects. So what are these? With the artifacts discovered in this area, and exactly in our region of the Bashu culture and dating back to the states of the warriors. So for those languages, they are not composed of the letters, but of some symbols, for example, in the shape of an animal, of a person, or of a vegetation, or some abstract form of mountains and rivers. So all those are the symbols of the Bashu language, the graph-based language. So could you please give us more explanation about it? So we have the patterns of the silkworm, we have the language based on the shapes of symbols of the tigers, of the snakes, etc. And those are the typical weapons from our Bashu region. So why do people have so many swords and knives with them? Are they used for the daily cutting of the vegetables and fruit? Maybe not as for better protection of themselves. Here we also have a demonstration of that symbol of language. Within the frame, we can see a pattern. This is a pattern based on the shape of the silkworm. If you take a closer look at it, you can see that inside this graph, the symbol there is a very cute silkworm inside. And in ancient days in this area, for the Ancient Shu Kingdom, they already have this culture of the raising of the silkworms. So that's why they have also integrated the symbol of the silkworms into their culture and more specifically into this language. And from this object, from this artifact, you could tell that in the past, in ancient days, back to the ancient Shu culture, people really attached a great importance to the businesses and also the commerce. And you can also find other proofs showing to us that in old days, really people had a splendid culture about the silk making and the silkworm raising. And for our viewers, could you please have a guess about the significance about this symbol? What is this silkworm doing? Is it a silkworm on a tree branch, or is it a silkworm already trapped by the silk? So please don't hesitate to leave the message. As mentioned before, we have different origins and inspirations for the symbols for this language. For example, we have the palm pattern and also the tiger pattern. At the bottom, this is the pattern from the palm. First, here you can see on the upper side we have a tiger, and on the lower side we have a palm, a hand of a person. So it's also very delicate pattern to make, and it requires evidently a lot of effort. That symbol of the palm or of the hand is quite common in the artifacts, and also some other flower shapes. And we can usually find the combination of the palms and also the flower or the palm with other tigers or other symbols. Yes, those combinations are quite common. You can pick 2 or 3 out of them to make whatever combinations you want. And we have also received a lot of questions from our viewers. Like these are the combinations of the palm feature and also of the flowers. So maybe for that symbol of the palm comes from one clan, and for the tiger comes from another clan. And if people can put the two different symbols together, it means that there must be already some friendship or a partnership between the two clans. So you have a lot of imagination about that. After rounds and rounds of studies, we have discovered that there's not a certain rule to follow in order to decipher these graph-based characters. It's quite hard for us to do the deciphering now. So currently, based on what we have, we believe that it's just a pure recording. For our ancestors, when they would like to take a record of something, they will take a symbol. But at the same time, the symbol could also be a quite mysterious thing, because we don't know what is the significance behind that. It's also like today's coded currencies, like the Bitcoin and the other currencies of today's world. So in the old days, our ancestors have already acquired that capacity of ciphering and deciphering. In the future, we are looking forward to more documents that would absolutely enable us of the reading and understanding of these graph-based words. For example, this one, we have two separate parts from the symbol that look like the existing character for Wang in Chinese language, which means the king. And for the other extra parts, we don't know yet. So for together, what does it mean? We believe that this looks like something from a seal. For the seal, it could be a symbol of your status in the society. We have also discovered from our archaeological researches and discoveries some seals with this Bashu graphic language. So with the seal, we can show to the other people who am I and what is my status in the society. And talking about these seals, we can also move to another treasure. This is one of the most important objects conserved by our museum. This is a spoon-like object. We have different patterns, like in the shape of the fish and also of the turtle, and also a flower. And also another with an insect. So from these symbols, we can immediately recall the previous 4 dynasties. For example, the bird would give us the imagination of Du Yu, or another emperor. And this fish is correlated with Yu Fu. And also the turtle means the Kaiming dynasty. And also the silkworm for Cancong. So this is just our guess. We should find more proof and more evidence. And talking about this Bashu graphic language, we still are in the pursuit of more solid proofs. So it's very interesting. I believe that the ancients and the ancestors, they have a lot of imaginations and also the joy of life. Maybe they are hiding something at the bottom of the spoon. Only after finishing the food within the spoon can you reveal the secret. And what are these? Our viewers could also have a try to guess. So to the right-hand side, those are the two seals. And this one on the left-hand side, it's the bronze spoon. And what about these? Those are the parts of the weapons, also made of the bronze. And on the surface of that, we can see the patterns of flowers and also other symbols. And usually with those artifacts from the weapon parts, we can also find the Bashu graphic language. This is the willow tree leaf-shaped sword. So it's mainly during the Qing Dynasty and mostly with the weapon parts can we find this Bashu graphic language. Yes, and apart from the weapons, also in some daily objects and also with the seals. Yes, certainly this Bashu graphic language would give us a lot of imaginations and inspirations. So today we also have a special guest. So we have invited Professor Yan Zhibing to share with us his own thoughts. Good afternoon, Professor Yan. You are a great expert of the Bashu graphic language. Could you please share with us your results of researches? What is that process of studying about this graphic language, from the states of the warriors to the dynasties of Qing and Han? In the basin of Sichuan province, we have discovered a lot of symbols dating back to that period. Compared to the Chinese language characters, those Bashu graphic languages looked quite different. So a lot of scholars refer to this language as the Bashu graphic language, and some others call them the Bashu symbols. And some others also call them the Bashu letters. You've been studying these graphics for decades. And currently, how many language parts of it have we already discovered? And you have already realized the classification of those language, right? Yes. We try to set up a total system of those symbols. We have already discovered 850 pieces. It is estimated that we could have a discovery of more than 1,000. Some of the objects, they are newly discovered and not yet classified, and some others are still under researches. So in total, in the existing system, it's estimated to have more than 1,000 pieces of them. After this classification, I found out that we have 272 different types of the symbols that can be put into 6 great categories. or types. For example, the body parts. Those letters correlated with the body parts of the human beings. And another type is correlated with the animals, for example, the birds, the snakes, and tigers, etc. Yes, just now we have already visited one piece with the tiger-shaped letter. It's quite challenging for someone like me who is not good at drawing. Yes, for those tiger-shaped or snake-shaped letters, they are for the purpose of ornament. And sometimes we can also look at the smaller pieces, and they could differ from the previous one in use. And the third type is the letters in the shape of the fruit and the flowers, and the fourth type in the shape of some architecture or facilities, for example, in the shape of a pavilion or in the shape of an altar. And another type is in the shape of daily objects, for example, the weapon parts or the vehicle wheels, etc. And for the remaining parts, we cannot figure out immediately their belongings, so we will just call them the geometry objects. For example, in the shape of the star or of a framework of a circular shape, etc. And among these different types, there can also be some combinations. Yes, exactly. As is mentioned before, we have already classified more than 800 pieces. So among those 800 pieces, they can be formed into millions, numerous combinations. And with different combinations, they can deliver a different message to the readers. Today, we are really eager to know the meaning behind that, and we are trying to decipher that significance behind that message. And have you discovered a rule to follow within the system of the languages? Yes, we have discovered some frequent combinations of certain symbols. For example, the palm symbol and the flower symbol. They are often coming out together. And those frequent and common combinations are very interesting in our eyes. And those almost fixed combinations could be quite similar to the proverbs in the Chinese language. It also looks like the puzzles in the mathematics. And for our Bashu graphic language, it's a much bigger and much more difficult puzzle to be settled. And one more question for you, Mr. Yan. For this language of Bashu, is it a pure language or a pure graphic system? For many scholars, they prefer to use the word graphic language of Bashu. So first of all, we can confirm that it's a graphic system. For example, on the surface of the weapons, and also for the seals, and also daily objects, we can find these pieces of languages. Sometimes when we have more than a dozen of symbols, they can have a certain order to follow in forming into those combinations. Once we have the combinations, then these order within their formulation can give us some clue in our daily thinking, and maybe it can help us to decipher that message. So whether we can call it a message or a language or letter system, we can find some clues from those orderly combinations. Yes, we are also looking forward to an earlier date of the deciphering of those Bashu graphic language. And among all the pieces of the Bashu symbols, what is the most impressive one in your eyes? Talking about the Bashu graphic language, I'd like to select that one in the shape of a bow. It can also refer to another artifacts that we have discovered from the Sanxingdui. And some others are also talking about the similarity of this symbol to the bronze bows used for the musical instruments. And you can see that we have a cutting and in the stone tomb discovered in the Maoxian County, we have discovered one utensil in bronze and also another bell in bronze. So this symbol in the shape of the bell, to date we have only discovered them on the seals. And these seals come from a particular district of this area. And we have also discovered the combinations of the symbols of this bowl and also of another daily utensil called lei. If we do a comparison of this combination and the other combinations, for example, the bells and the lei utensils from the stone tombs, we believe that this symbol of the bell could just be the symbol to describe the form of the bell. And in ancient days, the bells are used in the sacrificial ceremonies. And again, for our viewers, please don't hesitate to leave us the message, and you're always welcome to share with us your thoughts and your guess about the significance about this bell-shaped letter in the Bashu graphic language. So what's the meaning behind this symbol and what is the code of this message? Please don't hesitate to leave your answer here on our platform, and we may select several audience and give you small gifts as a souvenir of today's live streaming program. And thank you very much, Professor Yan, for sharing with us this knowledge about those treasures. So thank you very much again, Professor Yan Zhibing. And now we are coming back to Madam Xiaofeng. Thank you for waiting for us. We know that there are some must-see objects inside your museum. Yes. This is the stone rhinoceros. It's been discovered in history once and then reburied, and now it's the secondary discovery of this object. The large stone rhinoceros sculpture We know in ancient times there is a government official called Li Bing staying in this area in order to investigate and also arrange the construction of the Dujiangyan barriers. It's a kind of a water management, water conservancy project. And we all know that Dujiangyan had set a very solid foundation to prepare this basin of Sichuan and also the plain of Chengdu for very good conditions of agricultural farming. And when the Ancient Shu Kingdom came to an end, this area of Bashu has embraced another splendid age. For example, the Qing Dynasty. Yes, we also have the two big pieces of the stones. We have Mr. Pei and Mr. Li. On the surface of the two pieces of big stones, we have left so many letters on that in order to honor their endeavors and also contributions. So the two large stones or the two stelae, they are the records of the contributions of the local people. In the ancient poems, it is written that it's very hard to travel towards the Chengdu area or to the Bashu area. And for people that have never got a chance to visit this area, they may still hold misunderstanding about this region. But with those artifacts, we know actually you have had a very splendid civilization within this time. And now I'm about to present to you a footage. We'd like to show you about the old days of the kingdom. Good afternoon. My name is Zhou Lijuan. Together, we're about to see the first artifact. It's called Zhen in Chinese language. It's a utensil discovered in this area, and it's made of bronze. Moving forward, we're about to see the second artifact. It's a bigger one. It's discovered in the Baihuatan Middle School in 1965. We have also applied very specific techniques to decorate the surface of this art utensil. This is a jar in bronze with the mosaic patterns. For example, we have the silk and very thin layers of gold or silver on the surface of this jar in a mosaic way. It's a little bit shorter than 40 centimeters. However, on the surface of it, we can find 105 person characters. And how does it look, each person? It's not very clear through our camera, so we have used such a graphic to show the details. For example, on the cover, we can discover 3 ducks, the duck-shaped ornament. And on the body part of this jar, we can find 3 different levels of it. Starting by the upper level, we can see that someone is manipulating with the bow and also the arrows. And another person is holding a ribbon, guiding the direction of the marching of the whole fleet. And towards the right-hand side, people are collecting the leaves for the silkworms. According to the historical recordings, this is one of the oldest picture showing about the scenes of people collecting the leaves for the silkworms. And for the scene below, it's about the playing of the musical instruments. For example, people are striking on the bells. And over there, people are doing the hunting. And by the tail of the arrow, there is a string attached to it, so that once the bird is hunted, we can get it back very easily. On the third level, the lowest level, it's about the construction of the facilities and also about the walls. We have some horizontal lines and also the slashes. The horizontal lines could be the symbols of the city walls, and for the slashes, they are the symbols of the strings attached to the city walls, and the soldiers are trying to climb up the city walls in order to attack the cities. And to the other end of the picture, we have the flying flags and also the fighting soldiers. And at the lowest point of the star, we have noticed the symbols of the animals and also some traps in the shape of the heart. So once our animals fell into the traps, then it's quite hard for them to get out of it. In today's world, we have modern technology like the live streaming programs and also the mobile phones, so we can share with our friends the news and also the happy stories whenever we can. But in old days, this is the only way that our ancestors could share the message around. Still, we have to admit that it's a very high level of craftsmanship. After talking about all these patterns, we have invited Mr. Xie from our museum. He will reveal more secrets about these three artifacts. Good morning, everyone. I'm Xie Zhicheng. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xie Zhicheng. I'm from the Sichuan Provincial Museum. All those three artifacts, they could be a very good representative of the high level of cultural and craftsmanship in the ancient days. For the scholars studying the ancient days, especially the ancient Shu culture, these three artifacts could be a perfect tool and also the proof for them to deepen their understanding. We know that in ancient days, we have the splendid culture of the silkworm raising and also many other activities. In our museum, we have diversified collections of the artifacts dating back to the Western Zhou Dynasty, and also the jars in bronze, and also the objects dating back to the states of the warriors, discovered in one middle school, and also 12 jade objects discovered in 1929. So in Ancient Shu Kingdom, we had already reached a certain height of the cultural development. By the end of the Qing Dynasty, some people became really skeptical about the real existence of the ancient Shu Kingdom. But today we had no such worries or doubts about that. We have so many proofs to show to the world that the old Shu Kingdom did have existed, because all those artifacts, they are the perfect evidence for that. For all the viewers interested in those artifacts and also in the culture of the old kingdom, you could come and visit our museum. Dear viewers, I'm a journalist from CCTV. My name is Zhang Pengjun. The background may not tell you directly this is correlated with archaeological studies. However, we are in the heart of a laboratory. This is an archaeological laboratory for the animals and also the vegetations. Here is another place for the management and also the studies about the artifacts. Instead, here we will run the studies and also the testings for the soils discovered around the site of the archaeological discoveries. We have our guest. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wan Jiao. I'm one of the researchers of the Archaeological Research Institute. This is the Archaeological Laboratory. For example, here we have a skeleton, the skeleton of a pig. So not only for the studies of the animals and also for the vegetations. Passing by their desks, I've noticed that half of the personnel, they are absent today, so they are already at the sites for the further discoveries of the Sanxingdui. In the discovery places, there are a lot of pits. Inside, there are the ruins and also remainings, for example, the ceramics and other ancient objects. Some of the other colleagues, they will take the objects, and for us who are working inside this laboratory, we only take the mud, we take the soil for the further analysis. So how would you select those samples? At site, we will take one sample from every pit. It looks like a very easy job and also an easy choice. However, it's already calculated. We have already studied the possibility and also all the parameters correlated with the site of selection of the sample, and we will also write it down. When we put the soil into the bag, usually it's a plastic woven bag. For the consideration of the humidity within that soil, after being taken from the ground, usually the soil would remain wet for a long time, so we have to use that certain bag to carry them to our laboratory. This is the facility that we are about to use for the containing of the soil, and we will use the water to flood that soil collected. For the carbonized items, for example, the rotten roots of the branches, they will be extracted, and for the rest of it, they will be collected. For the carbonized objects and items, after this preliminary treatment, they will be dried again and taken into our laboratory. And that is for northern part of China, considering the differences of the weather and also environment in south and west China, and in the south and north of China. In the southern part of China, when we do the selection of the samples, we will put the soil into the bucket, and then we will put the water inside. Some items would be floating on the surface of the water. But this is quite labor-intensive work because you need one person to hold the bucket and another person to hold the filter. And only the carbonized items, because they are very big, would be held finally by our filter. And these ones, the black remainings, they are the carbonized items. So from this picture, we can tell that we have plenty of them. And later, we have to dry them indoor. We should never put them under the sunshine because that sunshine would damage the carbonized item. Because with the rising temperature under the sunshine, these samples may have the risk of swelling or deformation, etc. So all those are the preliminary steps of treatment before taking the soil back. Usually, we need to take a big amount of soil in order to wash all those remainings of carbonized items out of it. So it's not very practical to take all the soil back to the laboratory, so we will just do the preliminary treatment of the soil on site, and then we take the remainings back, so it's much lighter. So those are the remainings. We will use the nylon filter. The refined holes of this filter will try to capture all the carbonized item. And there's also a tag attached to it. For example, the numbering of this soil and also the pit number. With the floating treatment, we will also weigh the soil and also calculate the total volume of that. So all these statistics are recorded. And what are the other steps of treatment? So I will just take this small package and show you the whole procedure of the treatment. So the essence of it is to select the carbonized item out of the soil. And I will keep this tag here. Later we have to enter the statistics into the computer. We have to use this measuring cylinder. And also I will take use of this funnel. This is the most effective way to pour the carbonized item into this measuring cylinder. So you can notice here we have a rather high content of carbon, but sometimes you can also find some dried grass inside. For example, the grass roots. For this big part, it will not just fall like that. So we have to insert it into the cylinder. And I also have to clean the funnel for the future use. So you are very careful with all the details. Yes, we have to be really professional about it. Then we can read the measurement here. Because we have a very big block here. So with the adjustment of this error, it must be 100 milliliters. And we also have to enter the number of this sample into the computer. The volume is 100 milliliters, and then we have to weigh it. We should use this utensil. We cannot directly put our samples. So first, we have to weigh this utensil. And later, we also have to deduct the weight of this utensil from the weight of our sample. So you have to try your best to get the whole of it. I also have to close the door. Another round of registration. Around 60 grams. So it's quite a mess with all those samples. So now we have multiple layers of the filters, and each layer has a different diameters of the holes. We also have to use the cover. And now we have to shake it. So now the particles are already classified. We can see some blocks of earth, but also some carbonized items. So the first layer was how to capture the bigger particles. And for the second layer, I guess that we can find some seeds inside, but later we also have to use the microscope to have the further analysis. So this is the analyzing of and classification of our carbonized items. So maybe there are new viewers coming to our program. So could you please just give us a review about the whole process? In southern part of China, we will use the small bucket and add water into the soil samples, and we will use our hands to stir up the water, and we will take the lighter parts that are floating now on the surface of the water. Those are the carbonized items we'd like to take into the laboratories, and we use the filter to have the final part of those carbonized items, and then we will dry them and weigh them, calculate and measure them in order to know the volume, the weight, and then we put them into this filtering system, and we shake the whole utensil in order to have different layers and different categories of those carbonized items. So this is mainly for the analysis of our ancient vegetation objects. So here for each hole, they have a diameter of 2 millimeters. For example, for the paddy rice seeds, the grains would be remained here, and also when you move down the ladder, you can have smaller holes. Usually we would give the priority to the bigger items, and in the end, by the lowest level of this filter, you can find some really fine particles like the sand, and that is of small use, but still we will keep it. And after this classification, we will put them into different plastic bags. For example, what is their size of diameter? We will take them according to their size into different bags. And finally, we will use a larger plastic bag to put all the smaller packages inside, and also attach the ticket. So as we can tell, our researcher is really very careful with the whole procedure of the treatment. And after every step, she has to clean up the whole table and also pay attention to the registration of all the materials. So this is the final result. We have a bigger plastic bag holding several smaller packages. So on the surface of the bigger one, there is the mark for the code. This is like the serial number of the whole batch of materials, and inside the bigger plastic bag, we have smaller packages. On the surface of each, we have the diameter marked for the particles held inside. Then for the sand, we will also keep them. So inside those small packages, we can have the grains, the seeds. The priority of our analytical study is the grains, but it's not limited to that. We can sometimes find smaller particles, for example, the crops of the insects, like of the ants, of the other insects. Sometimes we can have some surprises. Like the wheat and paddy rice, we'd like to know what is the earliest moment that people start to grow and receive the seeds from the other regions or even foreign countries. If we can find some proof to advance the date, then it's a very big discovery. If no, it's still very interesting work to do. Sometimes we can also find the corpse of the insects. That in that case, that we know that those insects are also stirring up the earth in that layer of the land, and maybe some different layers of the land from different ages can be mixed due to the existence of the insects. And later, with those smaller packages, we will take a long time in order to do the selection and hand picking of those grains. So now I will just show you some final products. This is the place that we used to be working. And this is the closet with all the final products, the seeds and also the grains collected from the remainings. So those are the final selections that have a value for the archaeological studies. So all those boxes are numbered, so it can help us to locate those seeds we want immediately. So I'll just show you some of it. And I'll use my microscope. So later on, we will show you how these seeds look like under the lens of the microscope. I believe that it's quite easy to have a guess what are these grains or seeds. So can you see them clearly enough? So our viewers, maybe you can have a guess. What are these seeds? If you have the answer, you could leave a message on the platform and join our discussion. In order to give you a really clear view, I've practiced a lot, so we have to find a good angle to capture the whole picture of the seeds. So those are the carbonized seeds discovered at the ruin site. So man, you could give us the answer. Where are they from? They are from the Sanxingdui ruin sites. Some people said it's sesame or the paddy rice or wheat. So congratulations for those that are guessing for the paddy rice. So how can you tell that it's the seed or the grains from the paddy rice? So we have the photo here. For example, you have the stripes here. This is a typical character of the seeds of the paddy rice. And apart from that, do we have extra information from the seeds? Well, here in the Sichuan province, we have a really long history of having the paddy rice. But to what date could we date it back? We would like to know the origin, the first day that we started to have the rice. So today it can be dated back to 5,000 or 4,000 or 4,500 years ago. So by then, in ancient times, there were also a lot of big trees around, so it's not very easy for the farmers to cultivate the paddy rice. If you once visited the wild and you have already studied closely the paddy rice field, you must have noticed that with the plantation of the paddy rice, the whole plant would also change the composition of the land. For the plain of Chengdu, it's very flat land. However, you should know that it's the result of hard efforts and endeavors of our farmers here. In the very beginning, when the first group of farmers arrived in this area, we have a very high content, a very high level of forest coverage. In order to have arable lands, they have to cut down those trees. By then, they don't have the metals, for example, the irons or the steels. They have to use the stones in order to cut down the trees. And people are wondering whether they have used the fire to burn down the whole forest. Again, you have to notice that in this area, we have very high humidity. It's quite hard for us to burn the whole forest. And even that you could burn down the whole forest, still the roots are remaining inside the layers of the earth. So you have to get the roots of the trees out too in order to have the perfect arable land. You could imagine that in ancient days, we only have very small parcels of land divided by those big trees. So that is how we interpret the importance of cherishing our food from the archaeological point of view. When I was a child, we've never had millet, so I didn't know what millet is. We will only take the paddy rice as our staple food. We had the paddy rice every day. So in my childhood, we didn't have the millet very often. In ancient times, dating back to the old kingdoms, there were several major crops here. Apart from the paddy rice, that was the millet. And the paddy rice had a higher productivity and they had bigger particles. Today, when we go out for dining, we can have a lot of choices for the staple food, but in ancient times, we have limited choices. And today, thanks to your archaeological studies, we know what people had for the staple food. And the paddy rice can also be a symbol of fortune for the ancient families. With your studies and also the observations from the microscopes, how can we tell the exact date of those seeds? How could we determine their age? So even for the seeds of the paddy rice, they can differ one from another according to their different ages. If you still remember that we have collected all those seeds from the soil, so the seeds must have a similar age of the soil. So we can study the age of the soil, and we can even study the age of these relics. Is it a relic from the Sanxingdui period or from a certain dynasty? For example, the Sanxingdui culture, it dates back to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, and for another culture, even older, dates back to 5,000 years ago. So in our laboratories, after doing this floating as experiment, we could determine directly how old are these seeds. Apart from the references from the ruins and from the relics, do we have other options? Yes, we can use the carbon-14, the C14. We know for the carbon, usually the most common one is the carbon-12. With every 5,000 years, there are parts of the carbon-14 turned into carbon-12, and now we could just have a test on this object to see what is the content of the C14, the carbon-14, to tell their age. And we can also study the distribution of the paddy rice in order to know the distribution of different careers and of different groups of people. That is a very complicated process. For example, for one person, he is really in love with the paddy rice. Wherever he goes, he would take the paddy rice seeds with him. For example, in ancient times, sometimes people are obliged to leave their hometown in order to move to another region. So they will naturally carry the seeds of the paddy rice with them, and also with the machineries and with the other daily objects with them. And they can also discover the local conditions to see whether it's suitable for the next round of the paddy rice plantation. And gradually, this technique of paddy rice plantation can be spread around. That also explains why we can have this culture of the paddy rice in the plain of Chengdu, because some people must be migrating from another place to this area of Chengdu. And finally, we have embraced this culture of paddy rice plantation, and also we have built up the habit of the paddy rice as staple food. So inside this very tiny laboratory, we can have a lot of wonderful discoveries. For example, the age of these seeds and also the habits of people's daily living. Those are the notes. For example, the barley, how we can tell the difference between a barley seed and also a millet, and also the cultivated soybeans or the wild soybeans. So I've taken some notes to remember how to tell the difference from a cultivated soybean and a wild soybean. So some tips for you to differ one from another. So those are from the early days of my studies. So I've been working here for almost a decade. I came to this laboratory in 2011. And also on the shelves, we have a lot of sealed boxes. Inside, the samples collected from different sites. Inside each hole, we would put the selected seeds. And all those boxes are numbered, and you can keep a track record of all those boxes in your computer. So I'd like to take this image as the ending image, because those are the symbols of your hard work and also the endeavors of all the colleagues working inside this laboratory. So how much time have you spent on all those boxes? It's hard to tell, many years, because inside every box we have several tubes, and within every tube we have the seeds collected in different scenarios. And finally, could you please share with us your thoughts and your understanding about the archaeological studies? Because very soon we're about to have the further archaeological excavation of Sanxingdui, because our human beings have already a very long history, but for the recorded history, only 3,000 years. The environment has stocked a lot of precious information for us. Today we have more advanced modern technologies, so we could use those modern tools to distinguish and also capture those very small traces of information left by our ancestors and also by the ancient environment. By that, we would know how our ancestors have lived on this planet and in this area. In this very long history of the human beings, by the beginning of the story, those traces and stories and secrets and mysteries should be deciphered thanks to the contribution of our archaeologists. And this long road passed by our ancestors until today, it's a very long path, and it's also an interesting trajectory. For example, how we have developed from a stone age to a agriculture-based society until today's modern world. It's a very interesting job, the archaeological studies. We also have the TV series about the ancient days, but for our archaeologists, they are in close contact with the real history. all those traces and remained objects buried in the earth, they have existed for real in the history, and we would like to help our friends and the other people on this planet to better understand our history. So again, to honor your hard work, all those boxes